Tonight, finally, President Biden says he will close the border. Sort of. What to do with the millions already here, like the 19-year-old Venezuelan who shot 2 NYPD cops. Bill O'Reilly on solving America's unsolvable problem. Fauci faces the facts. New testimony shows America's top doc made up 6 feet of social distancing. Will we ever learn from the mistakes of COVID? Stealing the show.
We'd be well served to remember the long and cherished tradition we have in this country of settling our political differences at the ballot box.
How a congressman's son made C-SPAN must-see TV. Congressman John Rose and his son on humanizing Washington. And role model. Fellow WNBA players attack the league's biggest star.
She cannot be babied as a rookie. That's all I'm at.
How Caitlin Clark proves there are athletes who still come to play.
Question is, will they call it unnecessary?
Welcome to the fairest show on television. It was quite a weekend of news. And while you were hanging out with your friends and family over the weekend, hopefully you talked about things other than politics. It's kind of hard to avoid, though, right? It's hard to avoid looking at Washington these days and saying things are crazy. And you would be right. Things are crazy. And the craziness of Washington has now come to your hometown. My apologies. Crime, immigration, the economy, those have always been problems in all of America, and Washington certainly affects them. But in Wilmington, Delaware, for example, today, the First Lady, Jill Biden, showed up at her son's felony gun trial. Think about that for a second. The First Lady at her son's felony trial. Her husband, the president, Joe Biden, put out a statement supporting his son for allegedly lying on a federal firearms form. Hunter Biden, the president's son, faces 25 years for buying a gun while addicted to drugs. The president's son. That's crazy. I remember when the Obama kids would go to school and it was a big scandal if perhaps somebody smoked a cigarette at one point. Now they may go to jail. In New York, last weekend, they convicted a former president on very dubious charges, and he's facing dozens of other felony charges. The former president faces dozens of felony charges. That's really crazy. And never mind the new heroes of the Republic. 2 people who are being held out are saving the Republic are a porn star and a disbarred convicted felon named Michael Cohen. Over the weekend, Stormy Daniels was opining on all things Trump. By any estimation, she met him twice 20 years ago, and somehow she's famous. That is absolutely bananas. And to be fair, and to really think about this, bananas things are bad for the country. We've been through bananas before, and we've come out of it, right? The idea of what happened between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office, that was pretty bananas too, when you think about it. And then, of course, Donald Trump was elected president. That was absolutely, totally bananas when that happened, and we made it through that too. Investor and TV star Michael O'Leary took it a further step. The American brand has been dragged through the mud, sunk to the level of Banana Republic, where rulers take their political enemies out to the jungle to disappear. This great nation now stands diminished in the eyes of international investors, and the economic consequences for ordinary Americans could be dire. I, like so many others with sizable investments, managed just 2 hours of sleep Thursday night. For now, I have to consider seriously, do I move my money? Chairman of O'Leary Ventures and cast member of Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, is with us now. Good to see you, sir. Thank you. Hopefully you got more than 2 hours of sleep over the weekend. Have you moved any money?
I haven't put any money to work in New York. I've come to the conclusion, and I'm a real estate investor, specifically data centers. They're about $3.2 billion investments over 22 years. New York, while it's a great state for power, you can get Niagara Falls electrical power, very, very attractive. I don't think I know of one project going there. It's just too unstable right now. And the policy, the permitting, the nature of what's been occurring in the real estate wars and then the porno wars, It's just New York's in a different place right now, and okay, I'd like to see it settle down. I know I'm not different.
Yeah, fair enough that New York's different. You said, though, the American brand. And that seems to indicate not New York, but going overseas, right? That's not talking about moving to Texas or moving to Florida. You're talking about investing $3.2 billion, asking other people to invest with you. I get that the American brand has been damaged. I'd agree with you. But where in the world is better right now? Where's safer?
Well, the issue, everybody brings their money to the United States of America, and it's still the number one economy, and it's still the place where sovereign wealth wants to invest for the long term because of the transparency of our system, because of the appellate court system, which generally works things out over time, where there is total trust in the dollar and what backs it up. That's how it works. So anytime you do anything that starts to erode that trust, and it happens in incremental amounts, that's not good. And we don't, in the G7 and the G20, and of which we're members, you could argue we're the G1 in terms of the size of the economy, there has been a long-standing policy that unless it's murder, you don't take the executive and put him in court during his mandate or after it, because you don't want to sully the brand of the office, in our case, the White House, the United States of America. It's not worth it. That's the whole point. It's just not worth it. Now, this case, and I'm not against the jury's decision. I believe in the system. If there were flaws in it, as some have suggested, it'll get called out in the appellate system. But the whole idea of taking a president and what I spoke specifically as it was for me. I was in London, England, trying to syndicate. I'm trying to buy TikTok. Some people know that. I have to syndicate debt and equity for that. I've been all over the world looking for it. I'm getting my ducks in order for Jan 19th when the company has to be sold. When I was in London, Stormy Daniels, porn star, was testifying about condoms, penis size, bed manners. What does that have to do with campaign finance law? I agree with you. There may be some kids watching, but I understand your point. Your point's well taken. I think about 2016, stars who threatened to leave the United States. By the way, those were her words in court. She was saying that in court. Those were her words. I hear you. No, I hear you, and it was crazy. I just was trying to spare our viewers going through it, the trauma of it one more time. Stars who threatened to leave the U.S. if Trump was elected: Cher, Miley Cyrus, Barbra Streisand, Samuel L. Jackson, Amy Schumer. A lot of them said they were going to Canada, where you're from. And I'm wondering if you, as somebody who's an immigrant to this country, might have a different perspective on this, that we, and you rightfully point out as Americans, look at this and go, this is bananas, it's bad for the brand, it taints America, it takes us incrementally closer to just sort of being like everybody else, like Equatorial Guinea or something like that I wrote earlier today. But we're still the shining city on the hill. We're still the best place there is. There's lots of competition. I can tell you that right now. You can look at the United Arab Emirates in terms of where capital is going. Abu Dhabi is becoming the capital of capital. Every time I go there, I see more and more American private equity guys and hedge fund guys. Look, I raised, and my kids were born in Boston. I raised them there. They're Americans. They live here. One lives in New York. One lives in California. Two states I would never invest in, but that's their personal decision. The point is, we should really think about the mothership, the brand United States of America, and make decisions on a bipartisan basis. I know lots of Democrats are uncomfortable with this Trump thing. I know lots of Republicans that don't like it. I know lots of independents are saying, what did we get out of it? Like, what is the point of doing it? And sure, he should, if he did something wrong with his books, but why don't we wait till after the election? Why do we have to do it now? So it does smack of countries like Cuba, like Venezuela, like banana republics, where it just half the country thinks this is a very partisan problem. It's just, they believe that this election was politically motivated. That's 50% of the American population. That is not good.
No, you get no arguments from me about that it's not good to have this done. I'd argue that it's not good, the demands by Republicans to investigate Hunter Biden. Democrats are trying to get Donald Trump on the sort of the very fine line issues of his business records of a private company. They're trying to get Hunter Biden because they can't get him on anything else other than this gun charge and can't prove the corruption they're talking about. no argument that this is bad for the United States, but I always worry when everybody goes, oh, well, America's going to be replaced. Buffett always said nobody ever went broke betting against America. You brought up the United Arab Emirates. Mohammed bin Salam, or Zayed, who's the MBZ in UAE, who runs this place. There is no two parties there. There is no fairness. He is the law. If he decides to confiscate private wealth, he can. And when there's big crises in the world, the private equity guys don't look to MBZ in the UAE to figure it out. When FTX blew up, the crypto house blew up, it was American regulators who came in to save the day and to prosecute the crimes that were involved. It fears me when you've got people talking about, America's like Cuba, it's going to be replaced by the Gulf.
I'm not saying that it's been replaced. I'm just saying that we have never done anything like this in the past to any president, and I don't think it's good policy. I mean, what's wrong with debating the merits of policy between these two candidates? When are we going to get around to that instead of condom size? Like, I would really like to hear both sides, because I'm really getting bored of this stuff. And I'm not saying all my money's going to go to the UAE, but I would say one thing. Even China's figured this out. If you start just confiscating money, your cost of capital goes through the roof. That's what the Supreme Leader of China just figured out on.
Let me give you a theory of mine, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but it may be a place that we agree. One of the reasons that these two guys don't debate policy is because their policies in the end aren't that incrementally much different. They're both going to agree to spend and print a lot of money that America doesn't have. Incrementally, they're going to make some changes, maybe a little bit on the border, maybe not, maybe a little bit on what bathrooms people use in schools here and there. But by and large, the cabal of the establishment in America has taken over to the point that the establishment supports and keeps the establishment rich. And the middle class in America has gotten destroyed, and the working class in America supports the establishment.
Well, wait a second. No, I'm not going to agree with you there. I think you've painted a very broad swath on policy. Let me give you an example. We have huge debt in America. You've detailed that right now. It's a huge problem. How are we going to pay that back? Now, policy on energy. Let me tell you what happened in Norway in the mid-'70s. They decided to put a royalty on every barrel that came out of the ground to pay off national debt and fund a very large endowment for the country. Now over $1 trillion. Basically, we have the Anwar. Now, I'd like to hear some policy on the Anwar, the greatest reserve of oil on Earth, okay? Why do we not extract that oil, sell it globally? Because I'm in the camp that says, look, I'm not against, other sources of energy, but I don't believe in transition out of oil. I believe in diversification to other energy sources. We're going to need oil for the next 200 years. For the next 200 years, let's tap the Anwar, put a royalty on it with one covenant, one simple covenant. It cannot be spent for anything else except debt reduction. That's what they did in Norway. They guaranteed every dollar.
I hear you. I hear you.
My friend, that's policy. That's policy.
No, I was just going to say to you, this is the first time I've ever had anybody on this program who has articulated in less than 60 seconds one policy that might actually change things, which means it probably won't get done. But I admire you for being willing to say it. Thank you. Please come back anytime.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes, sir. You too. Something else that's crazy right now, the border. We talked about it. Hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants coming every month. Bill O'Reilly on whether a new executive order by President Biden can save the country. And Caitlin Clark is the WNBA's golden goose. And her fellow players do not like that. Watch the shove right there. That wasn't the only one. What we can learn from a woman who refuses to be a victim.
I'll take that role. I'll take the bad guy role, and I'll continue to take that on and be that for my teammates. And if I want to be that, and I know I'll go down in history, I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too.
Live pictures of the White House. President Biden is not there on this beautiful evening in June. He's going to be back tomorrow, though, to sign an executive order to finally secure the border. Kinda, sort of. It'll put in a circuit breaker where the border closes once a certain number of illegal immigrants come across for the day. We've been told that number might be around 4,000. Just this morning, a 19-year-old illegal immigrant from Venezuela shot 2 officers in New York City, police officers. As you can see, they're going to be okay. They were investigating a string of robberies. Here is that city's mayor.
Because of this vest, a young police officer is going home. Senseless act of violence, a total disregard for life. And everyday New Yorkers are not wearing this.
Migrant crime is just one issue, right, of the immigration issue. The immigration issue is the second most important thing for voters because it is a proxy now for so much of the disorder we all feel. It ranks just behind the economy. It's become a proxy for schools being overfilled, homeless people on the streets, on and on and on. The Republican House Speaker says tomorrow's announcement by President Biden won't do much.
It's too little, too late. Now he's trying to desperately show the American people somehow that he wants to address the issue that he himself created. We documented 64 specific executive actions that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas at DHS took over the course of the last 3.5 years, beginning on the first day that President Biden took office.
Bill O'Reilly is here, host of the No Spin News, author of the coming book, Confronting the President's No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. I have just received what is called the galley copy of said book, and my reading for the next few weekends is now upon me, Mr. O. Good to see you. As always, we'll get to the book in a second. You have talked about the border, I think, since your show, The O'Reilly Factor, began, or certainly since the early 2000s. Reasonable people can agree that the executive order is not going to fix any of the issues that now every city's become a border city, every state's become a border state. And it's not going to really do much to meaningfully stop the massive flow over the border, but it might change the numbers enough, would you agree, that President Biden, by October, can claim victory. He can claim that he's doing something. Border crossings are down by 42% or whatever it is, and that might help him a lot in the election.
Yeah, it might carry the dumb vote. I mean, the dumb vote might go for that. But according to Homeland Security, there are 6.2 million foreign nationals now in the country who want asylum, 6.2 million. And Homeland Security doesn't really know where they are or what they're doing. So the guy this morning at 1:45 a.m., Elmhurst, Queens, cops were watching him because he's a suspect in a series of robberies in that area. Cops confront him. He was doing something on a motorcycle, and he pulls out a gun, illegally, of course, and he shoots the 2 police officers. So this guy crossed into the USA through Eagle Pass, Texas. He was arrested. He's a former gang member in Venezuela, and they let him go, which is what Joe Biden has done for 3.5 years. They let him go. They didn't know where he went. They don't know where he is now. We know now where he is. He's at the Marriott Hotel in Queens, paid for by the New York taxpayer. Okay? At the same time, he's allegedly robbing people, and he shoots 2 cops. Now, that's one example. I can give you 5,000 others. The killer of Lake and Riley in Georgia pled not guilty on Friday, another Venezuelan in the country illegally. So if Americans really want to solve the problem, there's only one solution: remove Joe Biden. Because he doesn't want to solve the problem. If he did, he would have solved it years ago. He doesn't want to do that because the progressive left wants to let everyone in to change the demographics of the country. All right? They feel that they will harvest more votes down the road with a higher percentage of foreign nationals in the USA. That's why they're doing it. So, sure, Biden comes out in October and says, look at the stats. Legal crossings are down. Who's going to buy this? You already got 10 million in here. It shouldn't be here. Who would say, oh, yeah, Joe, we'll give you another 4 years? Come on. It's just ridiculous.
Okay. So I understand the dichotomy you're putting up. That said, the polling doesn't necessarily show that. They show that Americans overwhelmingly trust Donald Trump on the border more, but they do not overwhelmingly support Donald Trump for president for reasons that you and I have talked about. That said, Donald Trump was president for 4 years, didn't build the wall, and certainly didn't do the mass deportation force that he promised and get millions upon millions of illegal immigrants out of here. Why should Americans believe that, even though he may want to, a guy who is very good at talking and very ineffective oftentimes in getting things done because he's blocked and other reasons, is going to really follow through on this stuff?
Well, Leland, I don't know what else you want here. It's not about Trump. It's about Biden. So when Trump left office, there were 850,000. Right? Well, wait a minute. When Trump left office, about 850,000 migrants crossed over in his last year. Now the number is, 3-4 million? And the reason was that Trump threatened Mexico if they didn't put their army on both borders, Guatemala and USA, that Trump was going to slap a 25% tariff on all Mexican goods. So the next day, Obrador says, oh, yeah, we'll put the army on it, cut it down. Okay, so Trump actually dealt with the issue. Now, I don't want to get into, this is what Cuomo does all the time with me. Every time I make a point that's salient, every time, all of a sudden Donald Trump appears. Look, Donald Trump's going to have plenty of time between now and November to articulate his point of view about what to do with this horrendous policy that Joe Biden has reaped on the country. It is the worst policy of any president ever in the history of the United States. When you read Confronting the Presidents, Biden's open border is the worst policy ever. And nobody voted for it. This is all executive orders and failure to obey immigration law. Biden could be impeached on this easy. Senate would never convict him.
They talked about impeaching on him. They talked about impeaching his DHS secretary.
Yeah, but it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time.
I agree. You and I agree on that. All right. So I know you meant comparing me to Cuomo is an insult. I'm not going to take it that way. I'm going to take it as a compliment. He's a colleague. He's coming up next.
It's the record.
Okay, I'm going to give you, though, what Cuomo doesn't. I'm going to give you 45 seconds, not 30 seconds, to pitch Confronting the Presidents. And you say it's a Father's Day present, but it doesn't come out till September. So what do you got for Father's Day?
Well, you can pre-order on BillO'Reilly.com, Confronting the Presidents. But the best play is to give Dad or Granddad a premium membership on BillO'Reilly.com. You get Confronting the Presidents free. So Dad gets an immediate gift, and then when the book comes out, he'll get the book. The reason this book is very relevant is it shows you which presidents helped the country and which ones hurt the country. Don't rank them, not playing that game. We said this guy was good overall, this guy was bad. And now Americans are going to have to vote to two flawed candidates. That's what they're going to have to decide. But I'll tell you what, Joe Biden's reelected, just as your first guest, O'Leary, another good Irishman, said, Joe Biden's reelected in November. Catastrophe for this country. Trump, we don't know.
All right, fair enough. Bill, always good to see you. See you next week in person in New York. Thank you. Once again, Republicans missed a major opportunity by yelling and screaming at a hearing today. They do that a lot. Why they let Anthony Fauci off the hook without an apology. So much of the science during COVID, maybe I should say the science, literally came out of thin air. Lockdown, 6 feet of social distancing. Well, Dr. Fauci says he has no idea where 6 feet came from. None. Masking. Today, Dr. Fauci said there still isn't any science to prove mask mandates that we were told we had to do to save lives worked. At a congressional hearing, Fauci did what politicians normally do. After all, he was a politician. They blame someone else.
The CDC was responsible for those kinds of guidelines for schools, not me. So when I said that it just appeared, it appeared. Was there any science behind it? What I meant by no science behind it is that there wasn't a controlled trial that said compare 6 foot with 3 feet with 10 feet. So there wasn't that scientific evaluation of it.
That's interesting. And the word he kept using there, science, is an important one, right? It's a huge change for Dr. Fauci. After all, he was the guy who once declared himself the embodiment, really, of science.
So it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. That's dangerous. To me, that's more dangerous than the slings and the arrows that get thrown at me.
With us now, Dr. Phil McGraw, host of the Dr. Phil Primetime on Merit Street Media. His new special airing tonight is called Trump Verdict, a Judicial Travesty. I'll get you to the Trump verdict in a second. I want to get you on this issue of Dr. Fauci's testimony, because when he said they're really criticizing science, one of the people who criticized, especially lockdowns, was you, and you did it very early on. Here you are in April of 2020. Take a listen.
We have people dying. 45,000 people a year die from automobile accidents, 480,000 from cigarettes, 360,000 a year from swimming pools, but we don't shut the country down for that. But yet we're doing it for this, and the fallout is going to last for years because people's lives are being destroyed.
Obviously, this is vindication. You've been vindicated. Dr. Fauci is either one of two things. Either he's somebody who is well-meaning and tried to save lives, but perhaps got a little over his skis and became a little too sure of himself,